Hello friends, neighbors, John your neighbor here. Welcome to Sunday and a couple of samples. These come to me from Canadian Chris, although they are not Canadian whiskeys. This is New Riff Balboa Rye and New Riff Malted Rye. So it's going to be a bit of a rye tasting here today down in the Nook. I hope you've got some rye and maybe some of this New Riff. I've had samples of New Riff before, but neither the Balboa nor their Malted Rye. Very interested in this product, right? We got a heritage grain, and then we've got a fully malted. It's older, 6 years. First one's 4. They're both bottle and bond. So, I don't know. Buckle up. If you got a little bit of rye kicking around, you know I definitely enjoy good rye. So, pour something. Something all rye would be good. And come on back. 3, 4. Thanks. I really wish I had a bottle to share with you so you could see this, but maybe I'll put a fake bottle around here so you can see New Riff. If you haven't seen how it looks, it's pretty classy stuff. I'm going to start with the Balboa Rye. My understanding is there's a family farm nearby. It was growing it for a bit, and then they got into, and now I think they grow it exclusively. It's been kicking around their farm since at least the 1940s. It's a heritage or heirloom breed, so it's not as large, it's smaller production, and they say it's a lot of flavor. This is 95% unmalted Balboa Rye and 5% malted rye. I assume it's all Balboa Rye. Other than that, as I said, bottle and bond, it's at least 4 years, and it's 50%. Let's see what this rye is like. Oh, dark and spicy. That's very fruity. It reminds me, actually, Chris, you put this in my mind. You said it's kind of like dark oak a little bit, lot 40 dark oak. It's got like lots of dark cherry or other dark fruits, but it's already spicy and got a bit of that, you know, that rye bread and black pepper. Maybe not black pepper, but full fruit, and it smells a bit like it's going to be a spicy one. Let's jump in. New Riff Balboa Rye on the palate. Cheers. Even off the first sip, that is full flavored. It is rich. It's cherry, but also almost plum. It's dark fruits. In fact, I would say this is so fruity, it even reminds me of that Malted Green port. I think this is just new oak, 4 years, but the fruit notes are so rich. It's a rye though. It's drying on the palate, a little bit grassy. There's a little bit of mint in there, a little bit of anise, some licorice, and some oak. Better try another sip. Cheers. Even more classic rye came through on the second one. Now it's just nicely drying. Grassy. It definitely is spicy and peppery. Now that black pepper is there. I know I was saying I got something on the nose, but no, it's in the palate. It's got that spice. It's got that nice heat. It's so fruit forward in the early palate, but it just dries right up and is nice and spicy and almost leathery on the back end or on the second sip. It's full rye. Absolutely. At first, it was so sweet. I was thinking, like I said, like a finished rye or something of that nature. Second sip has just said, no, we're just in rye country, and it's a good country to be. I like rye, predisposed to like rye, good ryes, full ryes. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. I've had 2 sips of this whiskey, so clearly not an expert on this New Riff. But Chris gave me a big enough sample that I can enjoy it here, and I can also relax with it a bit later on. First thoughts on this though, this is fantastic. This is a really great rye, really, juicy, fruity, but also everything you want in a rye. Drying and peppery and spicy, almost leathery. I said that again, I'm going to say it again, like just the way it's finishing, that char and leather and spice, but mixed with, yeah, there's a bit of menthol in there. There's some rye. I mean, it is rye. It's just full on rye. So I don't want to hide that from you guys. Rye breads, you know, that the kind of drying breads. It's got dry in the mouth. Wow. But I have to say, this, it's just a sample. I'm a couple of sips in, but it's really nice. So that might have been a little high praise for only a couple of sips, but it is certainly well put together. This one has me a little worried. Not because Riff doesn't know how to do rye. Clearly they do. Great ryes. But this is 100% malted rye. And I have struggled enjoying malted rye. The best that I've had so far, I believe, is Zoldan Distillery. Their malted rye is really, really good. That's not the name of their rye. Just blanking. I'm like, what is that called? But that is the distillery. It's a Dutch distillery. It puts out a really good rye. But I've had several malted ryes that are local that just have had like, I don't know whether it's saponification or whether it's that cabbage, but I've struggled. Now this is a little older, so they've kept it in oak longer, so it's 6 years. I'm very curious, bottle and bond, 50%, all that goodness. I'm very curious how this new Riff malted rye came together. Let's try it on the nose. I need to take my time with that one because it really doesn't have the same fruits and other bright qualities of this Balboa Rye. This is a little more restrained, a little tighter. It's got some classic rye grain, a little bit of citrus. Yeah, a little bit of graham cracker, a little bit of nut. It's tighter on the nose. Maybe it'll open up after I have a sip. It usually does as my palate warms up to it. So let's try this malted rye on the palate. Cheers. It is certainly more subtle. Not in terms of spice. Actually, I'm getting spicing faster than I pulled it out of this one. Yeah, but definitely a little bit chewier, a little bit softer, a little bit more caramel, soft caramels in there. But as I mentioned, even on the nose, a little bit of almond or some kind of nut going on to thicken it a little bit, and that kind of slows down the palate. So spicy right up front, dry just like this one. Just like if there were we're mixing sounds, and one of those and sounds or flavors, just bringing that fruit right back down. Now I've definitely got grasses and haze and some nuttiness and maltiness, yes, definitely, and some malt sugars in that, some graham crackers, some nut quality. Boy, better have another sip. Cheers. This continues to be dry, malt, spice, nut, grain, graham cracker. Well done though. It doesn't have any of that saponification I was talking about or that skunk cabbage that I've had in malted rye. And seriously, that's a challenge for me. I've had several that are not cool. This is very nice, very well put together. Extra age on it is nice. It's tasting a little bit more slightly older. How do you describe older? Well, certainly less alcohol, less bite, but also a little more oak structure in a different way. And I have to say the long finish. Now I really chewed on it, so my palate is there isn't a corner that doesn't have rye in it right now. This is nice. Better than I expected, better than I've tasted aside from that Dutch distillery in malted rye. And I'm also glad that I have enough sample that I can consider it and relax with it. Absolutely relaxing dram that way, like consider it, but it's so, for me, these are both great. Now there's a bit of sweetness there, just a little bit of, what fruit would that be? Not this dark, rich, bright cherry. It's something else going on in there, but there is a little bit of fruit sweetness, but it took a while to come out. It could be that I'm just directly following such a bright and juicy rye, but it's good. It's savory, spicy, grain forward type rye, whereas this is that bright fruit and then spice and drying rye. They are both very, very good. In this sitting, just where I am on my palate, this Balboa Rye just kicked it. I love it. This malted rye, quality. good release, and I'm hoping to spend a bit more time with it. That's my thoughts on new Riff. I've just poured them with you guys. I sat out for lots of time before we got on here together, and then we sipped them live. What do you think? Do you like new Riff rye? Have you had either of these expressions, the heritage or heirloom grain or the full malted? And if you have, why don't you share your thoughts? I really like to hear your experience. And if it's wildly different than mine, great. That's the community to talk about. Thanks for joining me here. Thanks for checking out this new Riff with me. And I hope you've got some good rye for the rest of this weekend. Cheers.